Quartz is another material that is gorgeous that you find in a kitchen. It comes in all sorts of colors. It can be light or dark. One of the best ways to do it is to have all your markers, your 1, 3, 5, and 7, open, and you scribble. When you scribble, you leave gaps so that the markers hit the paper without anything underneath them. Scribble first. I'm in the light, so I want to scribble with my 1. Then I'll scribble with my 3. And anywhere the white didn't touch the paper, it has a chance to absorb. And I'll scribble with my 5. And I'll blend with the 1. You always have to save 1 in reserve that you blend with. So you blend with your lightest 1. And now I'll go back and dot with my other markers, and then you get a feeling of it's variegated. And you know, there are some really splashy dark parts too, so you can go in and put a little bit of that as well. This is more striking when you do it in color, of course, but in black and white it can read as what it is. Okay, so now in the darker version, we'll leave out the light one. If I have to do any mixing, I'm going to do it with my 3. And I'm going to go in now with my 5 and scribble, because I'm trying to hit the parts where, and I'll put some of my 7 in too. And now I'm going to mix, I'm going to blend with my 3. So any parts I didn't get, I'll blend with my 3. And you can keep adding. This one, it's looking not as spotty as I want it to, so okay, you can keep adding. So this I want to cover up more of my white, and looking back and forth to see that I've got a darker value. Now they're going to dry lighter, but hopefully it's going to work. And this one I'm going to maybe leave out the, I still need the 3 though. I'm going to put more 5. And try to leave blank paper so that the other 2 markers have a chance to fill in here. That was 5 and the 3, and now I'm going to put in some of the 7. I need more 7 here than I need of the other 2, and more 5 than the 3, so I can put in more 5. And wherever there's blank paper, I'm getting a little bit of variation. So I have 3 values now. The best way to give that a sheen would be with the white pencil. You would just go across it and give it a sheen, and you'd see some of what's underneath it poking through. And in these 2 values you wouldn't have anything. If you wanted to add a little bit more texture to it, you could go in with your black pencil and texture it up a little bit. For stainless steel, what's most important there is that you have gradual values. You have to have a lot of blending going on. It might be a good idea to take your clear blender and wet your paper, but get all your markers open first. So I want my 1 and my 3 for the first part in the light, and maybe some 5. If I get it really wet, I'm going to need some 5. On bond paper, it's quite easy to see that where the marker is wetting the paper. You can see it actually turns it a kind of pale purple. Mine does anyway. I don't know what. It turns it a bit of a purple. So now I can see I've got the paper nice and wet. This only works in small areas, so, and my plan is to have my dark, you know how there are those dark patches in steel. I'm going to have the darkest reflection right here, I'm going to have another one over there and one over there. So down the middle is where I plan to have my darkest patch. Now one over there and one over here. And I can blend that a little bit with my 1 if I need to. The most important thing about this is that you never want your darkest value sitting out on the white paper all by itself. It's got to be within this area of that you set up for it. So that's my 5, so I've got to go back with my 3 and blend that in, because it's going to look like a stripe. And I don't want anything looking like a stripe. It's got to look like it's... So that might be enough now to let that dry. In the middle value, you would move to your 3 and your 5, maybe your 1 as well, because the highlights on stainless steel are pretty bright. So instead of wetting it with the clear blender this time, we'll wet it with the 1. You might find it easier to turn your paper. I always do, so that we'll leave that up to you. And I'm just putting in vertical strokes here, just to... This would be how you would apply it. So that's how to do it. Again, I'm going to set up my area, my dark reflection here, and a little bit of a dark reflection over there, and one here. And while that's still wet, I'll put in my darkest. And I'm putting more of it this time, so that I have... There is a huge contrast between my 3 and my 5. So, and then I've got the 1, so I can use that to help bridge the gap. But the biggest rule when doing your stainless steel is that the darkest part has to sit within a dark area. You have to prepare for it and have a nice soft blend. That's the best way to do stainless steel for the method that we're rendering in today. Now I'm going to pick up my 7, because I'm going to need that for the next part. I'm going to use my 3 to start. Some countertops and island tops are stainless steel. Now I'm going to prepare the way for the dark area by getting it nice and wet, and we'll throw the 5 down. Whoops, that was the 5. That's the 5. Now I'll put the 7 down in the middle of the 5. So that was 3 first, and then 7 in on top of the 5. I might just let the paper do the work here, because that's looking pretty dark, so you've got reflected areas. Going back to the first one, we'll go in and make this a little whiter. That should be quite white in there. And you could go in and put some... Now stainless steel is not always... Well, I suppose it should be completely flat, but it's like glass. You can put reflections that are a little bit wiggly. I don't think there'd be reflections in the shadow part, but there might be. This is an example of how I applied the stainless steel instructions to the actual drawing. So you can see this whole plane is in the light. So I have my most of it filled in with the 1. I've left the white of the papers really important. And then I built up and built up with the 1 until I could add the 3. And then I think I put a little 5 in there too. So as I've mentioned, you have to understand what it is you're trying to achieve, and whatever you need to do to achieve that, you do that. We have the rules to kind of follow, but they may not work. They may not be right, depending on how wet your marker is and how much pressure you put on the marker. It's all a little bit different, so you've got to be a little flexible. And this is stainless steel too. It follows the same way. You've got a little bit of 1 and 3 over here, then you've got the white of the paper, then lots of 1 to wet the paper, and then this is 5, and I think it might even have a dot of 7 it might have to make it look more like steel. I've also seen countertops and island tops that are pure glass, just sea green glass, thick chunks. So if you did have a glass situation, you would begin it the way almost the same as this, but then you would put it in as wiggly lines, and it would reflect whatever is around it. So if there was a window around it, it would reflect that, and it would reflect it in the same values that it is in. So if it was out nighttime outside, a black dark window would reflect in it. We want to have the feeling of the surface of the glass and the reflections. We'll start with the 1 and the 3. We won't put anything too dark for our reflection to begin with, but I would put this on in a wiggly way. This is our 1, this is our 10, yeah. Just kind of wiggly, and leave some white. And I'd put a little bit of a wiggly reflection of the 3. There. And leave some white. Once that's dry, you would take your white pencil and go across it to show the surface of the glass itself. And that's kind of ripply too. This comes across more powerfully when it's in color, but hopefully you can see that or get the idea. If you can't see it, I can maybe throw a little bit of the 1 as across it so you can see it that way, to show the glass is going. There is a surface to the glass, and along with the reflections that you see. Now the side planes, I deal with them in straight lines like that. Just put them in as straight lines, but there will be a kind of a light gathering at the edges, so you might start it a little bit darker at the top and go to lighter in the center. It's glass though, so it's never going to be too dark. So we'd start with maybe our 1 again. And light's going to be passing through it. So we pick up our 3. So there'd be a white key line going along the top here. And you'd probably almost see a bit of a line. So there'd be a bit of a line, and then you'd see the dark parts, I think. And that would be, of course, along the edge of the, and we're not seeing very much, just tiny little bit. But the glass itself, if you were to render it, you see, it would take on the shapes of whatever's around it. We don't have a window or anything over on this side, but we do have these lights coming down. So you could render it, I think, just in that way, with those wavy lines, and it would work out. And of course, on the shadow side, you want to go in and go a little darker with everything. So you start at the top here with your 5, I think. So this is a little unrealistic because you'd never fill it in with your 3. You'd never have this much thickness to have to deal with on the side, but it will remind you that you have to make a difference between all of your planes. They can't be the same value. They just can't, or it doesn't look real. Our mind won't be able to, our eyes won't make sense of what they're seeing. So just a reminder of that. Just like with our first set of materials, you may find that all of these renditions are just too light to relate to your materials. For example, brushed stainless steel appears much darker than the other. So all you need to do, just like last time, is step it up a bit so that everything that we've rendered as halftone here will become what you do in the light. And for your shadow, you'll probably need to introduce black. In setting out to render your own materials, to experiment with that, remember that you're trying to capture the essence of the material. The markers you use, in the end, it really doesn't matter. The pencil crayons you use doesn't really matter. It's getting at that essence, and you do whatever it takes to get there. You don't forget you have gouache, you have white gouache and black gouache. The paper won't take a lot of wet media, but it will take some. So that's where you may need to go.